birthday present.
When I grow up, I want to be a football stadium.
When I grow up, I want to be a warm place on a cold day.
When I grow up, I want to be a fancy backsplash.
I want to be a bike that races around the country.
When I grow up, I want to be a bench on a forest trail.
I want to be a rocking chair on a sunny porch.
I want to be a skyscraper. I want to be
When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.org. A public service advertisement brought to you by Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council.
And welcome back once more right here to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and we love to hear from you, so you can text or send a message to the email or go online to naturalnurse.com and contact me, and you can join us on ground. We give classes every single day. Many of them are right here on Long Island, where we take walks in the woods and also just along your backyard, and we find out that there is so much edible and medicinal wild plants growing right here on Long Island, which were used by the natives who originally lived here, as well as settlers, as well as many of our Long Island residents. All you have to do is get to know that those things you call weeds are actually food and medicine. So you can join us for any of those gatherings. Just get in touch and we'll tell you how. Today, our guest is Major Peter Janow, a retired major, and he has lived on Long Island his whole life and is very active in environmentalism across many venues. And today he is here as part of his focus as executive director of the environmental group called the Coalition Against an UnSound Crossing. So thank you so much for being our guest today, Peter.
Pleasure to be here, Ellen.
Now, I know that what your main job is, this is not a political organization, you are educational, but you have a view that it's not in the interest of the environment or the economics of Long Island overall to proceed with this massive project of digging a tunnel, I don't even know how they would do that, or a bridge across from Connecticut to Long Island. What town in Connecticut would be impacted?
Well, right now, the state of Connecticut has shown little interest in being involved in this program, and that itself is telling. If there's going to be an economic boom, as a few people are saying, you would think Connecticut would be very interested, because Connecticut certainly needs help financially, as most of the states around here do. So the plan right now is going from Oyster Bay, Long Island, to Rye, New York. Mentioned earlier, when you look at the outline of where the bridge goes, it doesn't really save any time or distance in commute, because Rye is about as southwest as you can be along the shoreline on the north side of Long Island Sound. And thank you for mentioning also that we are a non-political, non-partisan group. We're a non-profit organization, and our focus is simply to get the word out and educate folks. We understand some people, when they look at it, off the cuff, they might say, well, that could be a good idea. That might, make sense somewhere. But as soon as they see the numbers, as soon as they understand the financial impact, they understand the pollution, the environmental impact, they understand that competing needed infrastructure improvements, we all know them, the railroads, our highways that need service and support, they're not going to get it because of this competing proposal. So for all of those reasons, once people are educated, and that includes our government officials, when they see the facts of the case, they're quickly saying, you're right, this is not a good idea. And right now, we've met very few people who support the proposal for a bridge or a tunnel.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the environmental impacts, which, we have a lot of oysters here, which are very sensitive, as well as a lot of other wildlife, which is both economically important and environmentally important.
Yes, and one of the big issues that immediately comes to mind is our water quality. And we know that Long Island gets the majority, if not all of its water, from the Long Island aquifer system. And with few exceptions, very few exceptions, the aquifer is something that we do not impede upon. We don't break into it. We don't cross that barrier. This proposal of a tunnel would have to break the aquifer barrier. And that's something that Long Islanders have held sacred for years. And if you look at the example where people are trying to build just their own dock, they live on the water, they're trying to build their own dock, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation will come in and say, no, you can't do that. So if someone can't put up a small dock for their small sailboat, how are we going to let the state come in now, violate our aquifer, disturb our fresh water source, and make this tunnel? It makes no sense. And on top of that, the current proposal goes through the National Wildlife Refuge, the Oyster Bay Wildlife Refuge in Oyster Bay, Long Island, and by law, by federal law, you cannot go over it, you can't go through it, and you can't go under it. So for New York State to even think about this proposal, they'll need to get federal approval to do so because they'll be violating federal lands. And as I understand it right now, the Department of the Interior and U.S. Fish and Wildlife do not have an interest in allowing that to happen.
Well, that's good, but we still can't rest on our laurels because, these things sometimes get passed in the middle of the night, and then once there's funding, and let's say construction companies, might benefit for years to come, and, who knows what. It's really wonderful that we have your organization, and I do want to remind our listeners, you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and my guest today is Major Peter Janow, retired major, and he is talking about issues in terms of environmental impact as well as economic impact, and from his point of view and with his group would really not be that beneficial to all of Long Island. So we want you to know about it. The website is UnSoundCrossing.com, and the name of the group is Coalition Against an UnSound Crossing. So it's really great. Now, I have seen a lot of articles in the newspaper lately about discussions of this. So it's not like it's not on the table. It looks like it actually is on the table. I know they've been discussing it at town board meetings and things like that.
And that's 100% true. And before we continue, one small correction. The website is unsoundcrossing.org.
Oh, that could be why I don't have it. Okay, that's good to know.
There you go.
I'm going to change that.
The governor's office is very serious about this. Again, his proposal dates back to 2016. They've conducted a feasibility study, which came out earlier this year. Interesting enough, though, the feasibility study concluded, yes, this tunnel or bridge is feasible, but when it came to the environmental concerns, not one environmental concern was formally addressed. As a matter of fact, the can was sort of kicked down the road, and they said these environmental concerns will have to be addressed via future studies. So they have a feasibility study that made a conclusion, but made a conclusion without any information regarding environmental impact. For me, as a citizen, that is absolutely concerning. Because, as you mentioned, it seems people might try to put things in motion quickly, maybe under the table, and I won't speak to that because I'm not a politician. But when I read a feasibility study that makes a conclusion without addressing one environmental concern, I am concerned as a citizen.
Well, I've been very involved with Friends of the Bay, by the way, since its inception, and I did a series of television shows, in fact, called Good News on Long Island, which featured Friends of the Bay, and that was way back when they were just getting started. And they've really made a lot of progress. So now, as you said, a lot of those areas are already a federally protected area, which, what are they going to do, go around that and still come across?
And that's part of the issue, and a lot of folks doing their basic due diligence and research understand that the proposal will be in violation of this National Federal Wildlife Refuge. And of course, other folks are paying attention, Town of Huntington to the east and those to the west, saying, well, if it can't go through Oyster Bay, where is it going to go? And the more you deviate from that current plan, the even less sense it makes, because it winds up intruding on other activities. It maybe winds up being a longer tunnel, which means the costs go through the roof. So for all these reasons, it doesn't make sense, but for these reasons, people are also fighting it. One issue you touched on before, which I'd like to go back to, you made the comment, what are they going to do, move my home? And the short answer is yes. Eminent domain is absolutely on the table, and based on the current plan, there are many families, dozens of families and homes that stand to be removed to make room for the tunnel and the entrance to the tunnel. And this is just not on Long Island. This is also across the way in Rye, New York. So when we talk about this being an issue, it's not just a Long Island issue, and we'll talk about the NIMBY not in my backyard if you like. This becomes a greater New York State issue, and that's why it's not palatable across the state.
Well, it sounds like we're very lucky to have you on board. Thank you so much for all your years of service and for your service right here in your home of Long Island of making an intelligent choice before we get involved in, they could say things like, oh, a lot of jobs will be here. Well, of course, it's temporary as long as the building occurs, and then all this environmental degradation and extra traffic, and only for the rich, because not everybody can pay $25. That's $50 round trip to drive over a bridge.
Yeah, brilliant point. It will be very expensive, and again, we don't want it to be a thoroughfare for Connecticut and New England. And you mentioned jobs. We all want jobs. We want to work with construction and other organizations that promote these sort of construction jobs on Long Island. I haven't met anyone who's against that. So what we say is simply, let's put these resources, these workers, let's create these jobs going towards infrastructure projects that we have and that we need and that are in dire need of being repaired and updated. Again, our roads, the tunnels and bridges that are in existence, and the Long Island Railroad to start. And if you take that $50 billion, and let's put this in perspective.
We do have to come to a closing here, so please finish your thought.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The annual budget in Nassau County is $3 billion. We're looking at a $50 billion price tag for this tunnel. If we took a portion of that money and simply applied it to our existing infrastructure, improving our roads, tunnels, and bridges, we'd be a lot better off than starting this new plan that doesn't really seem to make sense anywhere or at any time.
Well, thank you for that information, Mr. Peter Janow, and the website is unsoundcrossing.org, and we will change that in our written, where people can listen to the archive. So I want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, you can always email WHPC@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.